Great. So we all want to live in that positive Star Trek future. And we're going to ask our panelists here, how do we make sure we live long enough to actually, and healthy, to be able to enjoy that future? It is my privilege to host this amazing and distinguished panel today. Thank you for being here. And thank you for the sponsors for making it possible. I'm going to just briefly introduce you guys. Again, the bios are in the app, so please read all the accolades. I'm going to start with Dr. Jamie Justice, who is our Executive Vice President at XPRIZE, overseeing our health span and health competitions in general and our work in the health domain. And then Dr. Eric Verdin, who is the President and CEO of Buck Institute, locally here in California. And last but not least, Dr. Nizar Zein, who is the Chief of Transplant Medicine at Cleveland Clinic. Thank you for being here again.
Thanks, Anousheh.
Let's start with just a warm-up round. How's that? We've been talking about how can we live healthier lives? How can we make sure, even though our number of years has increased, the healthy number of years has not increased proportionally? So how can we live longer, healthier years? And when we look at science, behavior, medicine, regulation, what do you think? What is one or two things that you think will have the most important impact? And if we can go around and briefly start with you, Jamie.
So great. Thank you, Anousheh, for the introduction, and thanks for everyone for being here. So, when I think of that broader question about what's going to have the biggest impact, I think really it's going to be driven by both policy and cultural shifts, where we have to stop looking at diseases as one-at-a-time events and start thinking about those biologic drivers that are collectively increasing disease, disability, and death as we age. And so I think that's, is a fundamental shift. And so as we start thinking about these, whether it's longevity medicine or therapeutics, again, we're really looking at things that target that aging biology to compress morbidity, that act as those central drivers. And that I think we're getting there, is that we do have certain tools, we do have certain therapeutics, they are in testing, and where we're really trying to drive is to create a regulatory and policy change so that we can begin to not just test these, but to test them rigorously through trials, to have indications and approval pathways, and to have an opportunity also for reimbursement on the back end. So thinking about these collectively from a preventive or an alternative pathway. And I think that that's going to be really critically important. And I think that once we do have the evidence base there and also some of that policy framework around it, then we'll see the cultural shift, right? We'll have the proof of concept that maybe aging isn't this inevitable march to decline that's protracted and long, and that we can really rethink as a society sort of what productive, healthy aging means, and think about the preventable suffering that we can now begin to address. And so I think that, collectively that will ultimately change the way that we are living within the years that we have.
Eric?
Well, thank you, Anousheh, and thank you, everyone, for being here. I think about this in two large buckets. One would be what you can do today, and what you can do, what is coming tomorrow. Tomorrow, we will have drugs that target aging. They're not there yet, but the prediction is that within the next 5 years, we will have the first drugs. We might already have them, but we have not proven that they do work. Think about GLP-1 agonists, for example. So that's the immediate future. Within the next 5 years, we will have drugs that actually target aging pathways. What you can do today is what your grandmother told you, with an asterisk. So what your grandmother told you is your nutrition, physical activity, sleep, stress, and human connections, which, by the way, is actually the strongest predictor of your life expectancy, is the number of loving human connections that you make. The asterisk means that even though this is what our grandmother told us to do, the information was fragmentary, and it was not based on science. And I think a lot of the focus on the aging field right now is really to try to understand what is it about physical activity that actually increases lifespan or health span, and which modalities. You can do VO2 max training, high-intensity interval training, strength training, mobility, stability. All of those are forms of exercise, and people are sort of left to their own device deciding, what is it that I should do that will maximize my longevity. First, it's going to be highly determined on an individual basis. It's the whole concept of precision medicine, precision wellness that we've talked about. So that's a big transformation. It's going to be based on biomarkers, which is a big area in the field where we're trying to understand how can we measure and predict what is going to be the effect of an intervention long term. So repeat this for sleep, for nutrition, for physical activity, for human connections, sense of purpose. I think we've entered a stage of what I call scientific wellness, which is essentially taking the tools of science and applying to things that we have always considered as sort of soft science.
That's great.
Thank you, Anousheh. Thank you, Vartan and the President Sarkisian. I'm going to sound repetitive, but I really think that the only way we are going to show that lifespan is, or the best way, quickest way to show lifespan can be extendable, is going to be lifestyle modification. If you look at study came out in March of 2025, included over 100,000 people, looked at their diet in midlife as it relates to health and wellness later in age. It is overwhelming that your diet that you eat when you are in your 30s and 40s has impact on whether you have chronic disease or not in your 60s and 70s. If you look at relationship between sleep and neurodegenerative diseases, the data is overwhelming. If you look at smoking, on average, we believe smokers lose about 10 years of life. So imagine a world in which regulations will actually impose a state in which no smoking and no processed food and the sleep, I'll get to it in a second. I think you will immediately gain significant amount of longevity and lifespan, and you demonstrate the value. Then comes all what you talked about, the markers and so on. I think in the effort of trying to do some of these things, we created new problems. As mentioned in the previous session, we talked about GLP-1, that, okay, so in fact, study came out 4 days ago, published in Lancet, showed that obesity in adults seems to have leveled off now, probably because of GLP-1. So it was steadily rising, now it leveled off. However, in children, continue to rise on a very scary rate. But in the effort of doing that, we created this problem of muscle loss. We don't know what the long-term outcome is. So I am hopeful of all these interventions, but I think we know what works is that. So we said, okay, let's track everybody. Let's make it personal here. So we have the bracelet and the Oura ring, and we have the iWatch. I think what this did, again, everything has side effects, is nobody can sleep at night anymore. In fact, I feel like when I'm in my bedroom and my wife has a phone, I have a phone, I have a ring, she has a bracelet, it's like sleeping in a nightclub. One making, one red light, one green light, one decide to give a message. I think we ruined the life of people with the idea that we're going to track their lifestyle and we're going to make interventions. But yeah.
That's so true. And not only that, I think what happens is we're flooded with data now that we're collecting on ourselves, but truly we really don't know how to use this data productively. Going back to our health span competition, our goal is to increase the healthy lives in specific organs. And I think one of the most important things is to understand why XPRIZE would launch this, and how do you measure that? Because we're all about measurable objectives. So how do we use the prize to get there?
Oh, this is great. So, speaking of being flooded with not just data, I think anyone with an internet connection and social media knows that we're also flooded with treatments, gadgets, pills, things to make you live longer. And yet we don't have a way to test them. right? So this is actually creating a bit of a conundrum, is that there's real science that's being developed, novel therapies, new approaches, even tried and true things that our grandmothers have told us to do. And we need rigorous frameworks in which to test one versus the other to show that they work. And so that's sort of the backdrop of where we come in, but there's been an amazing field that's developed over the last 10 to 20 years of really, that we know that certainly our populations were living longer than we ever have before. This is a moment for great optimism. We have a longevity society, we have an opportunity in front of us. And yet there are some very real consequences that we have to deal with. We know that aging is the #1 risk factor for most chronic diseases, disability, and death. We have made great progress over the previous years of knowing that there is a biology to aging, and that we know that there are actually interventions that can target that biology, and that we've tested this in animal models through various programs over the last couple decades and showed that there are agents or lifestyle interventions that can, across species, show that you can extend median lifespan. And so we're at a point now that these are being translated into clinical trials, and yet there's not been a great framework by which to test them. This certainly has not dampened the market. There's a huge commercial landscape, but again, it's kind of like the Wild West, where we have rigorous science and commercial applications, but without a common roadmap. And so that's where the prize comes in. And so this is, again, one of the great reasons to do a competition is, right, you can either have sort of a funding or a regulatory framework where you make people do something, or you can dangle a really big $101 million carrot and ask academics, labs, companies worldwide to go chase it. And so in getting those people to get together, learn how to collaborate and build things together, is that we're accelerating trials, sure, but we're also accelerating development of regulatory frameworks, alignment across labs, and developing a large infrastructure, right? So data coordinating centers, central labs, other teams like the Buck Institute, like Singapore, others that are coming into this and helping to build the space. And so what we're asking our teams to do, they're going into finals right now, this upcoming year. And during the finals, we're gonna name top 10 teams out of over 700, down to 100 qualified. Now we're going down to 10 this year. And they're going to have to run rigorous one-year trials to demonstrate that their therapeutic can improve muscle, cognitive, and immune function. And that these are personalized response thresholds. So not just attenuate decline, not just prevention, but show within that period that you can actually have an improvement in performance-based measures and biomarkers. And that we'll be able to have those centrally adjudicated through a coordinating center and through labs. So again, for the first time, building that framework, that rigorous demonstration that's necessary to cut from all of that noise down to the signal. And so that'll help scientists, it'll help regulators, it'll help commercial investors. And it's gonna be, we hope, very profound for the community.
Great, thank you. So Eric, Buck Institute has been at the forefront of studying aging science. And as we all have become internet doctors ourselves, we look at all these hype and all these claims out there.
That's right.
So in your knowledge and experience between senolytics and metabolism and epigenetic reprogramming, which ones really work or at least have the best promise? I know we don't have proof that they exactly work, but which one have the best promises and which ones are overhyped in your opinion?
Where do I start? And it's been both a problem and an opportunity. The field of longevity carries enormous promise and hope, frankly, for most people. If I were to ask to this room, who wants to live to 150, please raise your hand. This is typical of what I would say. The first time I asked this question to an audience, I thought, nobody wants what we're doing. Or maybe I should just get into another line of work. Let me rephrase the question. Who wants to live to 150 in the same shape as you were at age 50, surrounded by your friends, your family, and of course, everybody? And so, and really, the different answers to these two questions is a reflection of we want longevity, but we want healthy longevity. And when you ask an audience, the thing that really speaks to them the most is really living healthy and fully functional. So that's the reason for the hype right now. The science is actually has been amazing. What we've been able to do, the buck has been in business for now 25 years. We can increase lifespan in most organisms in the laboratory setting with drugs, with interventions, and so on. So there's a discrepancy right now between what we can do in the laboratory setting, in animal models where we can modify every gene. We can do amazing things. The hard work now needs to be done is to translate all of these discoveries into humans. In humans, the barrier is much higher because we are presumably starting with people who are healthy, even though they are aging. We're trying to enhance this. And so there's, as we know, most drugs have side effects. We don't know any side effects of exercise or other lifestyle modifications, but so there's always the concern that whatever we're going to venture in the new world of trying to intervene in the aging process with drugs, that there's going to be a potential downfall and a potential risk for people. So we have to be extremely, maybe not extreme, we have to be careful. So if you look at the space right now, a whole series of actors have jumped on that story, that exciting story, and this is what I call Instagram medicine. This is essentially where you can get your medical advice and your medicine and your supplements from Instagram. I recently posted, for those of you who follow me on Instagram or because I'm also an Instagram doctor, follow me on Instagram or on LinkedIn, you will see I just posted an analysis of all of the existing supplements, and I organized them in 5 tiers. Tier 1 is the supplements that everybody should be on, but much more is all tier 2, 3, 4, and 5, which is the supplements for which there's really no evidence at this point. And that's pretty much everything. A supplement that you should be on is vitamin D, vitamin B12, creatine, maybe magnesium for some people, maybe some protein supplement if you're getting older, and omega fatty acids. So this is really sort of run-of-the-mill type of thing. So everything else has not been proven, even though it's exciting to see in the laboratory. So I tell people, until we get to the point where some of these supplements are being tested and proven to be safe and actually beneficial to most people, really focus on the true value, which is lifestyle medicine.
Yeah, thank you. Nizar, you work at this unique intersection of transplant medicine, working with seriously ill patients, and aging. So your years of working with organ failures and working with these patients, what has it taught you with regards to longevity and aging, and what can we learn from that experience?
Thank you. I think there are many things you can learn from very sick people. The first of which probably is biologic age resilience is a true phenomenon. That is, if you look at patients who were exposed to the same type of injury about the same time, some of them may suffer much milder injuries, some much more severe, some may recover a lot quicker, some may never recover. So that biologic resilience is actually very true. We live it every day. If you look, when I make rounds in the intensive care unit almost every day, we'll have, 10, 15 patients, many of whom had the same length of disease and with the same type of illness that led to being in the intensive care unit. You look at the age, at their chronological age, and some were in their 20s, some in their 70s. So clearly chronological age alone does not explain the behavior when we are exposed to injury. So I think this simple observation validates a lot of what scientists in the longevity were trying to tease out. What is chronologic age related, what is biologic age, how do we measure it, and how we can use that to extend longevity. The second thing very obvious in my population, which is patients with liver failure, is frailty is a reversible precursor to death, essentially. So we use it exactly as you guys talk about it in longevity medicine. We can determine the likelihood of someone surviving long-term or short-term based on frailty index, we call it, or frailty score, and so on. They do lose muscle mass, exactly just people. In fact, sarcopenia, as we call it, They term the sarcopenia, muscle loss of aging, as primary, and the one related to a disease as secondary. But the secondary sarcopenia shares exactly the same phenotype of the primary one, and probably a lot can be learned from it, especially that we figured that we can reverse it actually. So if we can reverse it in a sick patient, probably a lot of that in terms of identifying markers for aging and in terms of coming up with solutions for it will come from that population that are sick now, but we apply it to healthy individuals. A third very important, I would say, observation from transplant medicine is sick and old organs can be rehabilitated. And I think this is debated back and forth in longevity medicine. And I'll tell you why I say that. When we do liver transplantation, we take the organ from a donor. Some of these donors are older, some younger, some have fatty liver, some have been exposed to alcohol, some not. Some of these organs work perfect, we transplant them. Some of which they don't look well. We used to throw them away. We call them marginal donors, we are not going to use them. Then came along about 10 years ago something called reperfusion machines, in which we connect those organs, we give them blood supply through the artery and the vein, we collect the bile, we do intervention, we give them electrolytes, food and nutrients, we actually rehabilitate the organ. And to our pleasant surprise, many of times you see that those organs that were not working just 6 hours ago or a day ago, they start producing bile, and next they start producing albumin and proteins, and those organs, and we can keep them on those machines for days. Once we can actually intervene as in removing the fat from it. We call it defatting the organ, and so on. And then we transplant them. The outcome of those organs is now equal to a good organ. So what the message here is, there are many ways in which you can bring an old, sick, ailing organ and rehabilitate it, bring it back to life, and let it live another 50 years. I think these are, I will stop here, but there are many more lessons from organ transplant can be learned.
That's amazing. Imagine we can do that while the organ is still in the person.
Well, there will be a way, of course. That's
incredible. That's awesome. We're running out of time, so maybe I'll just pose a question to each one question to all of you to answer. And I want to just maybe focus on hope, because we're, all about a hopeful future. And what do you think will give you the most hope that our society will move toward a healthier lifespan for humans moving forward? What gives you hope about that when you look at what's happening around?
Right. Oh my, so this is a great question. When I think about hope, honestly, I think right now we're at a great convergence point where there's a lot to be optimistic about. We're at a point where, I do think we understand the biology much better, finally. I think we do have, potential tools and solutions through monitoring, through novel interventions, through various approaches that could be combined in unique ways. And that I think the third thing out of this convergence that makes me so hopeful is that I think we finally have this critical point of ambition to do something about it. Is that there's a movement within scientists, we're getting it both from the market, from patients, from others, that there's a time and the time is now, right? That there are various therapeutics that are now entering the market. Certainly, we've heard about GLP-1s and that there's some support there. There's novel immunotherapies that are coming out of cancer into other fields. We're seeing, my goodness, 2-3 weeks ago, the first epigenetic cellular reprogramming company entered trials for the first time. So there's a lot to be hopeful about. And that there's a moment that we're in right now that these are finally beginning to translate. We're getting a lot of hope, and we're going to start to get really positive readouts. And not just from single disease pathways, but really looking across in sort of this non-disease indication, really beginning to define what patient-focused development looks like in a way that can create meaningful change. But I do want to emphasize that for me, this hope isn't naive. I'm extremely optimistic. That's my natural state. But I understand, humans, we are not big mice. There's a lot in going into this translation that we have to be really mindful of. Certainly, I've talked a little bit about regulatory change. That doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it doesn't happen overnight. In fact, we really rely on our competing teams and our ecosystem to really put in the hard work with us as a collaboration to make change. And of course, when we think about healthy longevity, health equity continues to be the utmost importance, and we have to address it at each step along the way. And so again, it's not a naive hope, but it is hope. And I think that overall we have great momentum that I think we're at a turning point now that we can maintain.
Eric?
What gives me hope is first the science actually has gotten to a point where aging is now a tractable biological system that we can study, that we can apply. All of the tools that have worked so well to get us to where we are, we can now devolve it to aging. What gives me the greatest hope is the fact that the population is behind. We cannot impose health. And I'm seeing this especially in young people who are so interested in health. I've seen this with my kids who are in college. There are health clubs. They're stopping drinking. So health is, as a movement, is becoming something that's slowly, maybe it's uniquely sort of restricted to California, but I see this spreading across the country and across the world. And I think this is really the second component, the work we do and the support from society.
Oh, that's good.
All right, what gives me hope is you all. And no, I'm serious. And it's a platform like Atom that brings together scientists, academic institutions, XPRIZers, and all different walks of life for a common goal. There is no secret that science follows the money trail. I didn't make this up. This is known as old as human history. So these platforms going to bring together the funding needed to move that science forward. I think this is the hope.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. And there's hope after all.
Yeah.
Thank you.